It is Father's Day, right? I mean, did camp overshadow that? You're not allowed to have that much fun on Father's Day. I will say that I got the absolute best Father's Day gift any father could ever hope to get. This week, our youngest daughter, Alexis, is signing a lease on an apartment of her own. She's our last child. It gets no better than that. Oh my God. If you have any extra furniture or towels or anything you want to donate to the cause, please do. So there's so many things going on this week. Father's Day, camp getting out. This is the anniversary of a very difficult time in our church this week. And I thought to myself, how can I tie all this together? Because I had thoughts of Father's Day. Camp was not on my radar because Lex wasn't going there. But as camp and the high of camp unfolded itself today, I thought, this, what God has put on my heart is very appropriate for this time, for even camp, and it's appropriate for the anniversary, the dubious anniversary that we're having as a church here this week. Does anybody remember who spoke last on Father's Day? Last Father's Day here, who spoke? Tomas Chacon. Tomas Chacon did an amazing job under maybe the most difficult circumstances that I could imagine. He just knocked it out of the park. This was the first Sunday, last Father's Day was the first Sunday that we had church after Paris was missing. We didn't know the full news yet. It's been a year. Here we are. Did most of you expect us to be here a year later with this group of people having a camp that just occurred like this? Does it surprise you? Does it surprise you? Why is that? Because our focus wasn't on a man. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. Has it been easy? Troy? How about leadership team? Has this been an easy year in the leadership of Connection Church? Probably not. Very difficult. Well, we're going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to that concept of Connection Church and where we are in just a little bit. I've been in church nearly 50 years. Does that surprise you? Looking at me? Does that surprise you? It should. And I tell you, fathers get ripped off. I'm just telling you, fathers, compared to mothers and Mother's Day, fathers get ripped off. In society, we get ripped off. I'd say we because I'm a father. Does anybody know when Mother's Day was established? Any idea? 1914. 1914, approximately $21.4 billion are spent on Mother's Day, was spent on Mother's Day in 2017. How about Father's Day? When do you think that was established? Mother's Day is 1914. As important as fathers are, you probably think, 1900, 18 something? No. 1972. 58 years later, dads are finally recognized as being important. We get ripped off in society. Not only do we get ripped off in society, but we get ripped off in church. I have been, as I said, nearly 50 years in church, and I am going to paraphrase for you now. No talking amongst yourselves. I'm going to paraphrase. Every single Mother's Day service I have ever been to in church since I was about 5 years old. Everyone will be paraphrased in these few seconds. Oh, happy Mother's Day, mothers. We're so glad you're here. What an incredible thing a gift of a mother is. How many mothers do we have here today? Oh, that many. How about the youngest mother? Where's the youngest mother? Oh, you got a 6-month-old baby. That's wonderful. Who's the oldest mother? Well, you know what? The oldest mother deserves a flower. The youngest mother, she deserves a flower. And you know, let's just have all the mothers stand up right now so we can give them a big hand. And while we're doing that, why don't we just give a flower to all the mothers? It's going to be like the Oprah Winfrey Show. You get a flower, you get a flower, everybody gets a flower. Mothers are so wonderful. Scene. So, that is every Mother's Day service I have ever been to. Now, I'm going to paraphrase every Father's Day service I have ever been to in church since I was about 5 years old. Fathers, you have blown it. Fathers, you have blown it. I can't imagine what this world would be like if fathers were just a little bit like mothers. If fathers could get their life straight and be the example that God wanted them to be, fathers would be awesome. Do you know why, fathers, when the camera hits a professional athlete and they look at the camera after they made that touchdown, while the father says, "Hi, Mom"? Well, it's because they don't know who their father is. Because deadbeat fathers are the problem with the world today. So that's a paraphrase of every Father's Day sermon I have heard. Well, here at Connection Church, we have decided we're going to put an end to that this week. So we actually have a gift for every father that's here. So let's have the fathers stand up this time. So if you're a dad, if you're going to be a dad, or if you think you might be a dad but you're not sure, you can stand up. Now, this is not a flower. This is something much more practical. This is a multi-tool. Thank you. This is a multi-tool. It's a pen, a screwdriver, all kinds of stuff. There's probably some fishing line in there or something. You know, people bring their moms to church on Mother's Day. People take their fathers fishing on Father's Day. So, once you get your tool, multi-tool, hopefully there's enough. There should be. You know, there's one day a year where you, as a father, do not have to go to church. And that would be Father's Day. You can pull the trump card and say, it's Father's Day. Sorry, not getting up, not going. The only other day that potentially you cannot go to church and be okay is your birthday. If your birthday happens on a Sunday, you can say, trump card, birthday, not going. If your birthday is on Father's Day, that is the big kahuna of all trump cards. If that happened to you today, you should be home in your underwear watching NASCAR. That's where personally I will be in about an hour, as a matter of fact. And we are actually going to get to some scripture. Luke chapter 15. It should be no surprise to anybody that we will be reading this morning out of the Message. So, this is a really, really familiar passage. This is where Jesus was. Well, I tell you what. Let's just cut through all that. I'm going to read the first 3 verses of Luke chapter 15. By this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. The Pharisees and religious scholars were not pleased, not at all pleased. They growled. He takes in sinners and he eats meals with them, treating them like old friends. Their grumbling triggered this story. So you see the picture, these sinners hanging around Jesus and listening to him. The religious leaders, of course, ticked off about that. And Jesus, knowing this, decides, I'm going to tell you 3 stories. I've got 3 stories to tell you. Now keep in mind the motivation behind what Jesus, by these stories. And I'm not going to go through the first 2. The first 2, we're familiar with all 3, but I'll concentrate on the third one. The first one is the parable of the lost sheep. Now you know the story. Shepherd's got 100 sheep. 99 come home at the end of the day, and 1's missing. So Jesus is saying, which of you wouldn't go out, hunt down that sheep, put it on your shoulders, bring it home? And when you get the sheep home, what are you going to do? You're going to call all your friends and neighbors. You're going to have a celebration. The sheep that was lost is found. We all know that story. The second story he tells is the parable or the story of the lost coin. In this story, there's a woman who has 10 coins, very valuable coins to her. She loses 1. And he says, which of you would not get a lamp, scour the entire house, look at every nook and cranny until you find that coin? And when you find that coin, you're going to call all your friends. You're going to say, I found the coin, come celebrate with me. So these are the 2 stories. I find it, and after that, he goes into the story of the lost son, or as we more commonly know it, the prodigal son. And that's where we're going to focus a little bit of our attention this morning. It's interesting to me that the lost sheep was lost kind of through no fault of its own. Sheep are stupid. We've heard all those sermons about how stupid sheep are. Sheep he gets lost. He's a dumb sheep. And the shepherd goes out and finds it. The coin, on the other hand, an inanimate object, is lost. It's just lost. The woman goes out and searches for it. The story of the prodigal son is lost on purpose. He goes out on his own free will and gets lost. And in this case, there is no searching for it. You notice that? Isn't that kind of interesting? But what does God do? What does the Father do? The Father waits. I think these 3 stories are misnamed. We call them the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, or the prodigal son. In reality, I think they would be better named. The story of the lost sheep would be better named the story of the vigilant shepherd. Because it really is a story, not about the dumb sheep. This is just what sheep do. But it's a story. And remember this in context of why Christ is telling this story to these people. Because they don't understand why he's doing what he's doing. They don't understand why he's there eating, hanging out, associating, living life with these sinners. So this is much more a story about the nature of Christ than it is about the nature of a sheep. The story of the lost coin would be better named the story of the diligent woman. Not the story of a lost coin. The story isn't about the coin. The story is about how the woman tears her house apart to find that which is missing. And the story of the lost son, or the prodigal son, is absolutely not about the son. Even though we're going to read it, and you'll find the story is much more a story of a faithful father. A father that remains faithful to his son, even when his son doesn't remain faithful to him. Let's read chapter 15, verses 11, starting at verse 11 to the end of the chapter. He then said, there once was a man. Again, this is the heading of the story. There once was a man. Not there once was a son. There once was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and it began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his fields to slop the pigs. He was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs and the pig slop, but no one would give him any. My next page. We had a technical difficulty one time. I decided I'd print everything out, not rely on the screen. That brought him to his senses, he said. All those farm hands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God, and I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. He got right up and went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him, his heart pounding. He ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned against God, I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here. Given up for dead and now alive. Given up for lost and now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. All this time the older son was out in the field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked what was going on. He told him, your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast. Barbecued beef. This message brought to you by the Beef Council. Because he has a home safe and sound. The older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, look how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief. But have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours, who has thrown away your money on whores, shows up, and you go all out with a feast. His father said, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that is mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we have to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's found. You know, some people call that the greatest story ever told. Very powerful story. And there's something about hearing it. Again, I've read this story 10 times this week, maybe more. And there's something really powerful about hearing it and getting a glimpse of who the faithful Father is. The hardest part of being successful at any endeavor that we do is being faithful. This story being a story of the Father indicates to me that the Son knew that as soon as he came to his senses, he thought, I'm gonna go home to my Father's house. Not, I sure hope my dad is where I left him. You know, there was no Facebook, no messaging, no phone. He went to another country. But he knew that as soon as I decide I can go back to my dad, and where's he gonna be? He's gonna be right where I saw him last. He knew his father was a faithful man. He was faithful to his vocation. He was faithful to his family. He was faithful to his servants. He was faithful to the life that he had created. Do you want to be a successful father? If you're here on Father's Day, and this is the one out you have a year guaranteed of not being in church, then I assume the answer is yes. You want to be a good father. And that's why this message today, this is not a condemning message. This is not 50 years of the typical Father's Day message. This is a message of encouragement and thank you. That on Father's Day, you are here. You can rag on every dad that's not here after this, because they're the ones that have the problem, not us. Being faithful to your wife, your job, your church, and your God is not an easy thing. It's not easy because it's not something you just put on like a coat. It is something that has to be cultivated over years and years and years. And don't be mistaken, being faithful to your church is not the same thing as being faithful to God. Thank you for coming to Connection Church. Thank you for tithing. But don't think that that is the same thing as being faithful to God. However, if you are faithful to your God, you are typically faithful to your church. Thank you for that. When my boys were, I think my oldest was 16 or 17. I have 3 sons. And my middle son was probably 15. I think he had his permit. My youngest was 14 or 13. I decided it would probably be a good time to take them to Mexico. And not the Mexico of Cancun, where Lex will be going with us here in a few months. Not the party Mexico, the real Mexico. The land just across the border. Most of you know that I'm a MK, a missionary kid. I was in Mexico a lot with my dad, and I thought, what a great time, once before my boy gets 18 and is out on his own, this would be a great time when they can't say no, to throw him in a car and drive to Mexico. So we drove down to Laredo, Texas. My dad flew from California to Laredo. We met there, and we just went into Mexico to visit some of the places where he worked and ministered throughout his tenure as a missionary. And one of the main churches my dad worked with, one of the main areas was in Monterrey, Mexico. Monterrey is a massive city. I don't even know how many millions upon, it's massive. And he worked with a pastor named Manuel, and his church was in Colonia, San Antonio. And it was in a very kind of tight area, very densely populated. And the town, since my dad had been there, it had been nearly 20 years since he had been there, with no contact with Manuel. 0 contact in nearly 20 years. We got in that car, and we're driving through these streets, some scary stuff. And my dad's like, turn here, go here, turn this, I think it's over here. And we go to it. We drive right to the church. 20 years, no contact. And where's Manuel? At the church, working. Just like my dad knew he would be. Just like I knew he would be. What was it about this man that consumed him about the message of Christ, that he would dedicate his entire life to this very difficult neighborhood, to this very difficult place? But where did we expect him to be? We expected him to be there, and he was, because he was faithfully ministering. Where will you be as a dad when the phone rings, probably late at night, when one of your kids' car breaks down, when their air conditioner isn't working, or when they want career advice? All 3 of those have happened to me this month. I've got calls from 3 of my kids about a broken down car, an air conditioner that doesn't work, and what do you think I ought to do about my job? Do your kids even hesitate to call you? Just like the prodigal son knew, I can count on my dad. Is that the kind of dad you are? Well, if you're here, you probably are. That's why this is such an encouraging sermon. Have you been that rock? Have you been the faithful father that the faithful father was? I think you have been, if you're here. This brings me back to Connection Church a year later. If you're here, you didn't take the easy road, because I'll tell you the easy road, the road that I looked at several times, was, well, that Vineyard Church is awfully tempting right now. We don't have a pastor. I don't know who's speaking. It might be me. It might be Troy. I don't know that I want to show up, but I know who's speaking. That Yamaguchi man, he is awesome. But God apparently called you here. You didn't take the self-centered route. You didn't take the, oh, there's a better program over here. There's a better production. Troy mentioned production about camp and struggling with production. Well, if you were here a year ago, you know our struggles. The lights aren't flickering now. Isn't that awesome? We don't struggle so much with production. So you didn't necessarily take the easy route. The reason I thank you for being here is that you were not faithful to a man, but you were faithful to the gospel. We're in a difficult spot, and we were. But the fact that you were able to focus not on who our pastor was, but on who Christ is thank you. I don't even know how else to say it. Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised at me that I'm still here. Brad Thomas, he was our worship leader for a few years, and I don't remember anything that he said except this one thing. Out of 2 or 3 years, nothing stuck but this. He said, and apparently if you were one of his students, you heard this before. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now, today. I absolutely love that, because that is what faithfulness is. If you, as the youth of Connection Church, if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to make an impact on your friends and the world, then faithfulness is the biggest example you can give. And faithfulness starts right now. Faithfulness starts the next time you're at school, the next time you're in church, the next time you're at McDonald's, the next time you're in your car and someone cuts you off and you want to scream at them. Faithfulness starts right now. The example we have of the faithful Father is an example of Christ and his relentless pursuing of us. Do you want to be a successful father? Do you want to be a successful church? Then keep your eye on the goal. The goal is Jesus. Philippians chapter 3, I'm going to end with this. This is Paul talking. I am not saying that I have all this together, that I have made it, but I am well on my way, reaching out for Christ, who has so wondrously reached out for me. Friends, don't get me wrong. By no means do I count myself an expert in all of this, but I've got my eye on the goal where God is beckoning us onward to Jesus. I'm off and running, and I'm not turning back. Connection Church, fathers, this is to you. God is beckoning us onward to Jesus. Be off and running. Don't turn back. Start your journey of faithfulness today. Amen.